Hello again, this is Paul Malutnock, and we are in part 2 of chapter 17 of the book of Revelation. And we're going to be starting today with verse 8, and we'll conclude chapter 17 with this video. All right, let's begin reading verse 8 of chapter 17. The beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. And the dwellers on the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will marvel to see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come. That's interesting, huh? The beast is the world ruler that rises in the last days. Satan's man. It embodies all the powers of human genius, leadership, and supported by hell itself. This one who is portrayed in the book of Daniel, chapter 7 of Daniel, Daniel portrays him as an intellectual genius, an outstanding orator, politician, etc. Daniel says that he's a commercial wizard, meaning economically, military mastermind. He's an unequaled power in the world at that time. In the New Testament, he is described by the Apostle Paul as a religious-oriented man, as a noble blasphemer against God. He's 1,000 Napoleons, Adolf Hitler, Stalin. He's incredible human leader, ever in terms of human powers. His human genius. He is Satan's supreme human weapon to destroy Israel, to prevent her salvation, to kill the believers, to conquer the world for Satan, to defeat Christ. That's who the beast is, and the beast portrayed in chapter 13 in the first 10 verses. He is the beast that was and is not and is about to come. He was, he is not, and yet he is again. So in chapter 13, this means when the beast is first introduced, one of the heads, verse 3, had been slain, and his final wound was healed. There was a wound against him, and that was apparently fatal, and this healing of the fatal wound caused the whole earth to be amazed, and then to follow after the beast and worship the dragon, and then worship the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast?" So in verse 12, we have the false prophet exercising the authority of the first beast. He makes the earth and those who dwell in it worship the first beast. And here again, whose fatal wound was healed. And he, the false prophet, performs great signs, so that he even makes fire come down out of heaven to the earth because of the signs which was given to him to perform in the presence of the beast, telling those who dwell in the earth to make an image of the beast who had the wound of the sword and has come back to life. So the beast who was, who is not, and who comes, what does that mean? That's speaking about the death wound and that coming back to life. I believe it's a counterfeit resurrection. For the first period in the tribulation time, the religious system of Babylon exists. All the world is being gathered into one world religion. The false prophet runs the religious system. The Antichrist, the political, economic, military power runs the economic side, and they coexist. So you have the false prophet, and then you have the Antichrist. But the moment is coming for the Antichrist to take over everything using a fabricated resurrection. And when that happens, the Antichrist apparently seems to die and comes back. And when he comes back, he seems to be something very different. He is intolerant of the religious system that has coexisted, the Babylonian religious system. He wants to destroy it. In verse 8 says, "The beast you saw was, is not, and is about to come up out of the abyss." It's a reference to the same thing as the sea in chapter 13, verse 1. The abyss is the abode of demons. The abyss is hell, the dark place, the underworld of Satan. And what happens in this fake resurrection is that when the Antichrist supposedly is resuscitated and comes back, he's no longer purely human, but he now becomes the dwelling place of some other great demon out of the pit. He is elevated to some other being. The abyss is the abode of the dead, the abode of the demons. We note that in chapter 9 and chapter 11 of Revelation, both chapters 13 and 17 tell us that this fake resurrection amazes the whole world. The beast then is the Antichrist. The term beast, though, refers to the Antichrist. It also embodies his kingdom. So there's a sense in which he comes and goes and comes again, rules all over the world. A man, Antichrist, rises as a world ruler at the beginning of the period called the tribulation, conquers the world without war. Chapter 6, he rides on a white horse, conquering, and to conquer he has a bow but no arrows. How does he conquer peacefully? He conquers by lining himself up with a religious system that has gathered the entire world. So he takes advantage of this under a religious banner. He then leads the world politically, economically, and militarily. He is a powerfully gifted man. He leads the world on the economic side. He is the Antichrist. And the false prophet leads the religious side. And they are powerful together. And that's what it means when it says the harlot rides the beast. They coexist with one another. And one even supports the other. His death is then fabricated. He comes back to life. He's infused by a demon from hell itself. He's motivated into the final form of his satanic enterprise. He thinks he's at the top. He's going to take over the world. So now we have this time that he thinks he's going to capture the world and defeat Christ. However, verse 8 says he was not. He was. He is not. He's about to come up out of the abyss and do what? Destruction. He misunderstands where he's going. He's going to perdition, if you will. That's the word for eternal damnation. For him it means the lake of fire that burneth forever, and fire and brimstone and all that stated explicitly in Revelation 19 and Revelation 20. But most likely the scenario unfolds in the first 3.5 years of the 7-year period of the 70th week of Daniel. The first half of that period, he's coexisting with the harlot. Everything's fine. At the midpoint, he wants to ascend over the rule. He wants to rule with demonic deception, and he takes over everything. And we'll see what he does with the harlot. You can take a preview by looking at verse 16. He hates her, makes her desolate, naked, eats her flesh, burns fire with her. That means the end. He ends the coexisting relationship with the religious system. Is there going to be religion? Well, it will be a new religion. It will be worshiping him, not this harlot. It is the worship of Antichrist. So we looked at verse 8. This is a powerful thing that he has done, such a seduction, such a deception. He says, and those who dwell on the earth will wonder. They will be amazed. They will dwell on the earth. That is common term for the ungodly, used over and over again in the book of Revelation. Those who are enamored with the beast, who do not understand that he is on his way to hell, he's on his way to the lake of fire. He's on his way to perdition. They do not understand from where his power is coming from, the pit, and so they're deceived, and they identify themselves with him. And who are they? Those are people whose name have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world. It's an incredible way to describe who they are. It's a rare negative regarding the elect. What it says here is that the people who follow the beast are the non-elect. It's a reverse way of saying that only the believers will escape the deception. that the deception will be so great that if it were possible to deceive the elect, but of course it is not. This verse makes it abundantly clear that it is not. The only people who are going to be traumatized, who are going to be marveling, who are going to be trapped in the deception, are the people who do not fit into the category of names who are written in the Lamb's book of life from the foundation of the world. It is the Christ rejectors. They're feeling all of these judgments, and yet they will not respond. The trumpet judgments run their course, the bowl judgments, and all of that, and yet people still will not believe. In chapter 13 and verse 4, it says, they worship the beast, saying, who is like the beast, who is able to wage war with him? The whole world is collapsing all around them under the power of God, but they are amazed. They marvel. His supposed resurrection captivates them with all the other signs that they watch. In chapter 2 of 2 Thessalonians, verse 9, it says, the one who is coming in accord with the activity of Satan, with all the power and signs and false wonders, and with all the deception of wickedness for those who perish. Here's the other side, because they didn't receive the love of the truth, so also to be saved. They don't perish just because they weren't elect. They perish because they refused the love of the truth and to be saved. So the world will be deceived by this power. And at the midpoint, according to verse 16, the beast will consume the harlot, the false prophet will be his ally, and the consumption of that false system, because in chapter 13, the false prophet then rebuilds an image to the beast and demands that the whole world worship him. That's the point at which the harlot is consumed. The whole Rome system is consumed. The whole Babylon cult is consumed, and there's nothing left in the world but the direct worship of Satan and his demon-possessed leader. And that's where the world is going. Verse 9. This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. So when it says, here is the mind of wisdom, that's just one way of saying, here's an invitation to a closer inspection. We want you to look more deeply at this. It's an unusual phrase by the way it introduces to us to a very difficult and complex aspect of this vision. You're going to have to look deeply at this, and only those with spiritual minds and spiritual wisdom are going to understand the revelation that's about to follow. And maybe those who are alive at the time are really going to understand what's going on. And what is it that we have to understand? That the 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. Now we go back to verse 3. The beast, full of blasphemous names, is depicted as having 7 heads and 10 horns. 7 heads and 10 horns. That means the 7 heads are the 7 mountains on which the woman sits. The word mountain is oré. It doesn't mean a high mountain or lofty. It can mean a hill. It can be a small mountain. It's used in Matthew 5:15, John 6. It could indicate a small hill. Many people associate this with Rome, the city built on 7 hills. And it's for us to remember that the system called Babylon, the false religious system that exists in the first half of the tribulation time, is going to be linked to Rome. And I think there's an allusion here to the 7 heads being 7 hills. Throughout the history of the city of Rome, it's been described as a city of 7 hills, which rise from the banks of the Tiber River. And this is one the Roman coinage uses throughout the centuries. It's the Roman literature. It's in their prose and poetry. There was a commentary written on it in Revelation, the first in history to write a commentary on Revelation. And it was written by a person called Victorinus, and he applied this verse to Rome. So it can't be just the hills, otherwise it would have to say that here is a mind that has wisdom. It wouldn't say that because it would be obvious. There's got to be something else, something deeper, more than just Rome, because the false religious system is worldwide. Let's look at verse 10. It says, they are also 7 kings, 5 of whom have fallen, 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he does come, he must remain only a little while. Now, we have to go through the reference to Rome, if indeed there's a reference to Rome. And we can assume that perhaps there is some reference there to Rome, but we have to go through that reference now and find something else. And what do we find? 7 kings. The beast is vastly more than one city. His great empire covers more than one city. The false world religion system will be involved with more than one city. In fact, it will be a world empire. A call for spiritual discernment means there's got to be something more than just a geographic reference to a city with 7 hills, or we wouldn't need that spiritual wisdom. But we do need it here. What are we talking about? Well, there are 7 kings, 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other has not yet come. And what does he mean by that? Well, the heads are on the beast, not on the political, not on the harlot, not on the religious system. The religious system is one world, unified religion, but the heads are on the beast. The beast is the political figure, not the religious one. But Rome is now even powerfully political and economic, so Rome may be referenced here, not for its religious component because the 7 heads are on the beast, not the harlot, but still there could be some reference made to Rome. But the primary issue here is that the mountains represent kings. This, by the way, was common in the Old Testament for mountains or for hills to represent a symbolic, a symbol of rule. And so we find that in Daniel, Jeremiah, Isaiah, Psalm, Zechariah, Habakkuk. So the mountains here represent 7 empires, 7 kings, inseparable from their kingdoms. 5 are fallen. Go back to Daniel, we find out who the kingdoms are. The image of Daniel in chapter 2 of Daniel, verse 37 to 39, provides this. Daniel's image pictures 4 kingdoms, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. Remember the great image, and the head was gold, and then the upper part was silver. And this is in Daniel. And that bronze was the midsection, and then steel or iron and clay mixed. Okay, all on the way down. The descending weakness is depicted in the changing metals. It's the same thing that's depicted in the tabernacle. But those were the great 4 world empires, Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. Prior to those, there were 2 great world empires, Egypt and Assyria. And at that time, John writes, Rome is still a great world power, which we know it is in the 1st century. So going way back to the beginning of history in the biblical frame of reference, we have Egypt and Assyria. That's 1 and 2. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greek, and Rome. That takes us up to 6. As John writes, 5 are fallen. 5 have gone out of existence. What are they? Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece. And as John writes, there's still one in existence, and that is Rome. In fact, John is in his exile from the Roman government in the island of Patmos. Henry Morris writes this, quote, though none of the great empires actually ruled the whole globe, each one was the greatest kingdom of its time, particularly in reference to the land and the people of Israel and these kingdoms' opposition to the proclamation of God's word and the accomplishment of his purpose in the world. These, of course, have not been the only kingdoms that have been in enmity with God and his purposes. And the category would also replace such kingdoms as Syria, Edom, Moab, Midian, and many others. But none of them were great empires of great size and influence. I'm still in the quote. On the other hand, he writes, there were other great and powerful empires in the ancient world, like China, India, and Incas, for example. But these had only a peripheral contact with the Word of God and the chosen people. There were only 6 kingdoms that met both criteria up to the time of Christ and the apostles. Furthermore, all 6 of these were not only legitimate heirs of political Babel, but also religious Babel as well. Babylonian, Egypt, Syria, Greece, Rome were all strongholds of the world religion and evolutionary pantheism and idolatrous polytheism. Thus, they are appropriately represented as 6 heads on the great beast that support the harlot. So we learn that 5 are fallen: Egypt, Syria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece. Then, says the angel, 1 is, and that's Rome. Then he said the other one has not yet come. What is that? That is the future kingdom of Satan and Antichrist, the future great world kingdom. And when he comes, and again, the beast is synonymous with this king. In this case, it is the beast, the Antichrist. When he comes, he must remain a little while. All that says is it's a brief time. He will have his kingdom, but it will be for a very brief time. In fact, in chapter 12, verse 12, it says, "Woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has come down to you, having great wrath, knowing that he is only a short time." Chapter 13 and verse 5 says, "It will be 42 months in which he will blaspheme the name of God and his tabernacle." And that, of course, is the second half of tribulation, where he speaks arrogant words against God. He blasphemes God. So, 7 hills represent 7 kings. 5 are fallen. 1 is Rome. 1 is yet to come, which anticipates the final empire of Antichrist. But then we have another note here in verse 11. It says, "As for the beast that was and is not, it is an 8th, but it belongs to the 7, and it goes to destruction." Now you've got to think about it a little bit. What he says is that the 7th is the kingdom to come, the kingdom of Antichrist in the future. But not only is it the 7th, but it is also the 8th. How can it be the 7th and be the 8th? Well, what's going to happen to the Antichrist? He's going to appear and die and rise again. So he is both one of the 7 and himself also the 8th. A little confusing, but if we think about it for a while, it makes sense. This then looks at the last and final phase of the Antichrist rule after his supposed demise and resurrection, after he destroys every form of religion and demands the whole world to worship him, we saw in chapter 13. So for the first half, again, he will coexist with the harlot. We'll see more than that. And then he will demand that the harlot be destroyed and the whole world worship him. And then he will be the final world empire, and he goes to destruction. That, by the way, is the theme of the chapter, his destruction. And that's exactly where he's going. He is called in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3, the man of lawlessness and the son of destruction. He is the son of destruction. He is not going to fall like the first 5. He is not going to fall like Rome. He's going to be destroyed by God. Let's look at verse 12. "And the 10 horns that you saw are the 10 kings who have not yet received royal power, but they are to receive authority as kings for 1 hour, together with the beast." So we saw 7 heads on the beast, which represent the 7 kingdoms up until the final form. And then the 8th is referenced in verse 11. We look at that again. "As for the beast that was and is not, it is an 8th, but it belongs to the 7th, and it goes to destruction." Okay? He also, this beast also, according to verse 3, had 10 horns, which he said, "You saw are 10 kings." The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings. Again, the imagery back in chapter 12, verse 3, what does that mean? It's 10 simultaneous kings. The final kingdom is the 7th and the 8th, but it is composed of 10 component parts, that 10 horns. A horn being an indication of power and authority, representing that. In the final kingdom of Antichrist, the 10 horns refer to 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom. During the time of Antichrist's reign, there will be 10 kings that help him rule the globe. Also, there are some articles that talk about dividing the world into 10 zones for the ease of ruling. Daniel describes the image, you remember, as having 10 toes. And so perhaps in the final form of Antichrist's rule, he's going to divide the world into 10 zones. And he's going to give certain men authority to rule on behalf of these zones. In some way, this will be a part of the federation of the Antichrist. They haven't received a kingdom yet. That's because the Antichrist hasn't taken over and apportioned out the world and assigned it to their responsibility. But they receive authority. Look at verse 12. And the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received royal power, but they are to receive authority as kings for 1 hour together with the beast. So they'll be devoted to the beast. Verse 13. These are of one mind, and they hand over their power and authority to the beast. So it makes sense that the Antichrist is going to take control of the world, divide it up, put people sort of like sub-kings who answer to him to serve his purpose and give him all the power. They will do this, and they will do it his will alone. He is God to them. And what is his purpose? To destroy Christ, to destroy Christians, to destroy Israel, to prevent the kingdom. Then verse 14 says, they will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them. For he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those who with him are called the chosen and faithful. I put a picture of that on the cover of my notes. So that's what they're going to do. That's their agenda. That's the purpose. And when? Well, we go in chapter 16, verse 14. Demons perform signs in incredible deception. They go out to the kings of the world to gather them together for the war of the great day of God. And verse 16, they gather them together to the place which in Hebrew is called Armageddon. And that's where the final war against God is going to be fought. Armageddon. A 7-year period tribulation begins just after the catching away of the church. We don't know how long after. The Antichrist rides in as if it were on a white horse, conquering. He has a bow, but no arrows. He's a peaceful kind of conquering. He brings a world peace. He takes over the world. At the same time, a false religious world, global form of religion and worship grows up and to exist. The harlot, the religion riding along, supported by the beast. Then at the midpoint, the beast doesn't tolerate anymore, as we shall see, consumes the false religious system and demands that the whole world worship him. He then becomes the world leader, not only politically, but spiritually, always having apportioned out his world into 10 zones. He has the kings ruling on his behalf. His power, first part of the tribulation, was the 7th great world power and prophetic order. And after his false resurrection, he becomes also the 8th form, and that's where we are at this particular point. However, this battle is going to be lost by him. And the Lamb will overcome them, it says, because he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And those who are with him are called and the chosen and faithful. The Lamb will overcome them. That is repeated in the theme of the book of Revelation, that the Lamb will be unveiled, the Lamb will be revealed, the Lamb will triumph. Back in chapter 6, verse 16, it says, fall on us and hide us from the presence of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. Chapter 16, verse 17, the wrath of the Lamb comes again, and there is lightning, there is an earthquake, like never in the history of the world. Every island flees, every mountain is gone, huge hailstones, men blaspheming God because of the plague, the wrath of the Lamb. Chapter 19, verse 17 to 21 describe the tremendous Holocaust of the Lamb's wrath and a massacre that is just beyond description. Now, the reason that all the forces of hell, all the demons and all the powers of evil men cannot defeat the Lamb is given right there. Because he is Lord of lords, King of kings. He is the supreme one. Chapter 19 says, on his robe, on his thigh has a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. By the way, that title is a divine title for God that goes back to Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 17. And the angel adds a marvelous note. The angel said this, and those who are with him are the called and chosen and faithful. It can't be angels. Angels are chosen but are not called and don't operate by faith. It has to be the saints. It has to be the believers who are also described when Christ comes. When he comes, verse 14 says, the armies in heaven, clothed in fine linen, white and clean, are following him on white horses. The saints, the redeemed, the glorified church, the only ones who are called, chosen, and faithful are saints, believers. And that's, by the way, the great salvation text. It starts with the election in eternity past, comes to the calling to faith, which saves. Angels will be there also. Matthew 24, verse 30 and 31 says he's coming back with his angels. 2 Thessalonians 1:7 said he's coming in fiery judgment with his angels. They'll be there, but so will the saints. So it's an ill-fated war. He may have an empire that's greater than Egypt and Assyria and Babylon and Medo-Persia, Greece and Rome. In fact, he may have an empire that's the embodiment of all the strengths of prior empires. He may have control of the whole world, and he'll have kings doing his bidding. He may have his own great purpose. He may have Satan on his side, deceiving and doing signs and collecting them into Armageddon. It's the greatest force ever amassed against God. And that takes us to the last point of the chapter, the extermination of the harlot, the extermination of the one who rides on the beast. Verses 15 through 18. And before we get to the extermination of the beast, we'll get that, but we'll already had the promise of the destruction in this chapter. Look at what the beast does to the harlot. Let's read verses 15 through 18. And the angel said to me, the waters that you saw where the prostitute is seated are peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. And the 10 horns that you saw, they and the beast will hate the prostitute. They will make her desolate and naked and devour her flesh and burn her up with fire. For God has put it in their hearts to carry out his purpose of being one mind and handing over the royal power to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman that you saw is the great city that has dominion over the King of Kings. At some point after he gained control of the world, he wants the world to worship him. He wants to be God. That's the ultimate blasphemy. So he hates the harlot, makes her desolate and naked, burns her up with fire. Doesn't like the competition because religion itself has great power. It has seductive control over people of the world. And if you don't think religion has a great power, greater power than politics, then ask yourself why all the politicians on the face of the earth can't stop people from fighting each other over religious issues. They can't. It doesn't matter what they try, they never succeed. All the politicians are racking their brain to try something. Well, the Antichrist will not be able to tolerate that, and there's no doubt about it. Religion becomes extremely wealthy. He wants the homage, he wants the wealth, and you know that he wants the kingdom, and a kingdom divided itself it cannot stand. And that's what Jesus said. And Satan is finally going to wake up and realize that he can't do this thing to defeat Christ. He has no chance at all until he pulls this division together. And he makes her desolate. He robs the system of its wealth because it has become very wealthy. Its treasure, its power, its everything. The religious system of the world is left with nothing. The false prophet, he wants a job, and so the job left to be is the one who points to the beast. And so the beast eats her flesh. That just means everything's gone. And there's nothing left. And even what may be the residue, the bones, will be consumed with fire. Now, why in the world would he do that? For God has put it in their hearts to execute his purpose by having a common purpose and by giving the kingdom to the beast until the words of God should be fulfilled. It's in verse 17. Guess who's directing the whole deal? God is. From the beginning to the end. God is allowing him to destroy Babylon for God. And Satan is doing God's will. He doesn't know it, just like many of the stories in the Bible. He wants these kings to give their kingdom to the beast. He wants the cup of iniquity to be full. He wants the war with the Lamb. Why? Because he wants to totally destroy wickedness on the earth. That's God. Bring them on until the words of God shall be fulfilled. All the prophecies of judgment, all the prophecies of Christ's return, and the establishment of the kingdom is to be fulfilled. The mysteries of God are to be finished. And that's the way it's going. So in chapter 17, it gives us a picture of this final destruction of the final form of false religion. They call it Babylon. All that's left now is the beast, and his world empire with Christ will destroy it. To better understand the beast and his empire, well, we'll go through chapter 18 next. So thank you for watching part 2 of chapter 17 of the book of Revelation. May you be blessed by this book. God promises it, and may God bless you. Thank you.